Through this series of giving yourself permission, there's something that I think is really valuable to share and allow yourself to be able to do, and that is rest and recalibrate. Something that can happen, especially as a leader and someone who has responsibilities for supporting other people and providing a means for them to have a livelihood and support the people that are important to them, is this weight of responsibility. And sometimes when we recognize that weight and we recognize the value of being a leader, it can become more challenging to take those breaks, to take those opportunities to really rest and to really have space to recalibrate. And I'm not talking about a vacation. I'm not talking about spa days, which I do enjoy. I'm talking about giving yourself permission to adjust the way that you're doing life so you have space and a bandwidth to actually recalibrate what's going on in your inner world, to have spaces where you learn what it is to function from rest. That's not just a physical reality, but a place where your soul has found a rhythm of peace that it begins to function from. Because in this space of peace and a deep abiding joy is where you're going to have the greatest capacity to be creative, to be able to problem solve, to be able to find these pockets where you're able to build relationship in a way that's fun and enjoyable while still being responsible and building community and building a legacy and completing the calling that you feel is on your life. So this idea of rest is so profound that I'm just going to touch on it. And really this video is to encourage you to give yourself permission. You know, for several years, I worked in a hospital setting and I really enjoyed it. I did a lot of leadership roles and took a lot of different opportunities to expand my skills. But after several years, I realized that I didn't want what was next. And I had this feeling of guilt, recognizing it was time to move on just because I felt the weight of responsibility for what was happening in the department. But after I left, I realized something. The hospital survived. The department figured it out. People stepped up and were able to function like a team. And part of what I had to realize is leaving as a leader in whatever capacity that I was functioning in meant that being gone gave permission for those who I was able to have impact with to step into the leadership role that they were designed to occupy. And it also dealt with some pride in my heart to say, oh, what are they going to do when I'm gone? Honestly, being a leader means that eventually you're not going to be needed. And that's a good place to be because you're recognizing that you're building other people. I just share that example to say that some of the angst that we go through because we feel the weight of the responsibility and the weight of what we bring to the table can cause us to not take space to address some of the things that are happening in our inner world. And what I mean by that is some belief systems, thought patterns, emotions, unresolved wounds, things that are manifesting in our present that we haven't given space to really dive into. And something that's really valuable that has helped me is recognizing that the law of the conservation of energy actually applies to us. And that law simply states that energy is not destroyed or created, but it just shifts form. And when we have these unaddressed areas in our heart, especially when we've labeled them in a really nice way, especially in Christendom, we can tend to do that, where we may have anger, but we soften it by calling it frustration. Or, I'm just a little bit annoyed, but God has me. We can use these phrases that seem to convince us that there isn't these underlying emotional wounds that are finding expression within us, because they are. And when we have these really strong areas within our lives, the weakest link will break. You can be someone who's really, really strong in your spirit. You engage the things of the kingdom of God. You are someone who, has these prophetic gifts or other spiritual gifts that you're actively participating in. You can have a strong soul. You are dedicated. You are committed to your beliefs and the things that you're doing. And you know that what you do is carrying impact, and you'd be really, really motivated. And when you do that, as people, betray you or things that happen along the way, you know the principle of forgiveness. So you automatically go, I forgive them. I release them in my heart. And you have forgiven them. However, in that process of forgiving, if that's what you have done, there could be conclusions, thoughts that are still present even after you've forgiven. And when those parts of you haven't been addressed, they still have a rooting system inside of your heart and your soul. And those negative emotions, those negative thought patterns have to be held somewhere. And oftentimes they're going to be held in your body. And so having a really strong spirit and a strong soul means your body is going to hold that energy, and it's going to find an expression. And something that I have noticed just in conversation with some specifically Christian leaders is this capacity to recognize that there's an area that of struggle in your life, but oftentimes it could be attributed to the enemy. Right? Oh, it's just a test that the Lord's putting me through. The enemy is just attacking my body. And we attribute to the enemy what is actually a manifestation of the things that we have permitted to exist in our hearts and our lives. And our body's telling you, this is what I'm feasting on. I need you to look at this. And because we are so held with this idea of holding responsibility, we can ignore it, and we can redefine it in a way that allows us not to give the attention that it deserves. And it's going to find a way to express itself. That energy has to find somewhere to be held. And I share that because I've gone through my own journey of burnout, especially being a high capacity leader and someone who was very used to having multiple things on the go, and I really enjoyed what I do and was part of a community that believed in miracles, signs, and wonders. And I was actively seeing it in the ministry I was doing. I love the work that I had. I had a full-time practice in a multidisciplinary clinic, and it was something that was really feeding me. However, there were emotional wounds along the way. There were relational issues that had happened that I had forgiven, but I hadn't given truly space to heal. I went on vacation for a couple weeks thinking, oh, my body just needs some time away. But it eventually crashed. And it led to a multi-year healing journey. And part of that journey for me was having these honest, reflective times with the Lord, because I do believe in God. And so I take that time to be reflective. And even if you don't, it's important to pause when you notice that there's something shifting in your body. What is it that you haven't potentially given a voice to that is still having impact into your physical body? It's a signal that something's going on in your heart and your soul that needs to be looked at. And what was happening for me is I was able to push through some emotional wounds because I knew how to apply skill sets. I knew how to reframe it in my thinking. I knew how to rationalize why forgiveness and applying memorized scripture verses felt like I had dealt with it. But really, I hadn't. I had used really good biblical principles to hide some of the things that I hadn't fully exposed to the light of God and given space for Him to reframe in me. And so part of what my journey looked like going through burnout was redefining how I process emotions and going back to the beginning of readjusting my belief system. And I tell you, that was upheaving, and that was so deconstructing that parts of it was painful and parts of it was wonderful, but it was certainly necessary. And I'm sharing a bit of that personal journey with you because what I didn't do at the time was give myself permission to have the length of rest that I needed to recalibrate my heart and my soul. And someone listening to this will resonate with this. You may be working full time, love ministry, but have gone through things, have a family with responsibilities, and you kind of are always on. You take vacation maybe once or twice a year, and maybe for a week or two you take a breath, or you go do things with your family and you assume that that's enough of a rest. Sometimes it really isn't. And sometimes there is financial responsibilities that you do have. So what does it look like to give yourself permission to rest and recalibrate? Part of what that might mean is letting go of good things. Sometimes what needs to be adjusted isn't something that's wrong in your life. It is sometimes something that is good in your life that has been valuable for you in a season, but will not serve you well for where you're going. So right now in your present, what can be good can actually be a limitation. And by holding on to it, you're not giving space for something new that is meant to come into your life. And so sometimes that opportunity to rest gives you permission to evaluate things in your life, even good things, to recalibrate those priorities so you're functioning in a place that doesn't cost you you. So if you happen to find yourself in that scenario, you may have to ask yourself, what's a good thing that you may have to reevaluate? If you were to wake up tomorrow morning with all of the situations that you're walking through completely and utterly solved, what would that look like? What would be happening in your world? What will you be feeling? What would you be thinking? What will your relationships look like? Give yourself permission to imagine what those realities are. What kind of balance are you able to strike? What are the one or two things that are the most healthy and operating fully in your life? And what does that mean for you? What does optimal health look like in those one or two priority areas in your life? And what's one step you're going to take to allow that to happen? Once you have a vision of something, it's easier to take the next step towards it. And for someone who's listening to this, I encourage you to do that. You have been faithful. You have been consistent. You have taken on responsibility and have shown yourself to be trustworthy. But in the process, have you noticed that your energy may have been shifting? Have you noticed your relationships have been not as connected? Have you noticed that your body's not responding? Or are you allowing the idea that, oh, it's just age, or I'm just going through something, been the reasoning that you're using not to take the rest, not to take the pause to actually recalibrate? Because for your body to start manifesting and showing signs of, hey, something's up, it's been there for a while. And now is that time to pause. Now is that time to truly let yourself have permission to adjust. And for you, if that looks like counseling, then by all means, step into that. If it's finding someone who is trustworthy in your circle to really have some real open, honest conversation, then do that. If you're not even sure where to start and you need someone just to walk alongside you in a collaborative way, then coaching might be the means for you to step through that. And that's something that I actually really love doing. And I also love offering retreats, opportunities to allow leaders like yourself to have spaces where you do some focused heart work in an environment that allows for God's presence to be present and actually have space to actually process through some of the emotions that you have with a touch of luxury. If that resonates with you, I'll actually put some information in the description of this video so you can look at what retreats that we have, especially around recalibration, and also to book a discovery call if that's something that resonates with you. But whatever you decide, it's really important that you give yourself permission to rest and recover. Now, I'm just going to take a moment and make this soundbite to those of you that come from a faith-based background, or Christian, or shifting from kind of this religious structure into what it means to function in the kingdom. That this concept of rest is so pivotal to the idea of sonship and what it means to function from your identity. One of the things that we tend to do is speak one thing, but not take time to evaluate how our belief systems are lining up. We can say things like we are functioning from grace, but still within our world, we have allowed certain theologies and mindsets to persist that prioritize performance. And sometimes those ideas that we have agreed upon because they're consistent with our community belief or things that we have come to agree with because it's what's in our community can become really limiting. And they can be a source by which we overwork ourselves into a space of performing that costs us ourselves. And so, what I want to say to you specifically is, will you give yourself permission to reevaluate the things that you don't think might need to be adjusted, which includes belief systems? And not only the belief systems, but if you have a truth, potentially the interpretation that you're holding around that truth is causing you to step into functioning in your own strength. And one of the deceptions of that is that you don't even realize that you're doing it. And one of the beauties of learning to actually rest physically is it begins to open the door of what it means to allow your soul to rest in the finished work of the cross, where now you find your identity as a new creation, and what it means to function from a place of rest as a leader, so it's not costing you in other areas of your life that are important to you. So this idea of giving yourself permission to rest and recalibrate is so vital to how we move through the world. So I just wanted to encourage you with that today. Hopefully you found something that was helpful for you, an insight that you can grab onto. And if you're that person who's starting to feel those changes that are happening in your soul and your body, do not pass go. Do not ignore these yellow signs, right? If you're looking at that red light, yellow light, green light, you're in a yellow light zone. You're in a cautionary place. Don't allow yourself to hit where I got to, where you were at that red and your body just had to say enough. Take an opportunity, pause, and decide. Are you going to give yourself permission to truly rest and recalibrate? You get to decide, but I want to encourage you to stay mobilized.